So we'll do a couple of, spend a couple minutes just doing some introductions. One of the things we like to do is for new people on the call, just to announce who you are, your name, your voice, so we can hear your voice, and just a snippet of kind of what you're involved with. It's not meant to be a presentation or dialogue, but just to kind of tell us where you're working and what you're interested in, and that kind of gets us to hearing who else is on the phone. So it's always exciting to hear that. Then we'll dive into a very brief overview. I want to make sure that we're all sort of aligned around why we're doing this work and how what we have done in 2019 and what we're planning for 2020 is relevant and how it connects together. So just a few slides on that. And then we just have a few slides on some of the highlights from 2019. So folks who are who've been to who have not been here, we'll point out a couple of things. For folks who have been here, I want to also point out some interesting and exciting things for us. But we do hope to spend the bulk of the time today on looking forward. Excuse me, not ready to do that yet. Looking forward into 2020. And the way we're going to do that is we have 3 previews of things that are coming up. We'll have Dr. Karen Smith talk about a really exciting series on social determinants that we're planning. Also, Kate Ryan will be talking about next week's call, a little preview into the new proposed NIEM health domain, National Information Exchange Model health domain, which for those of you who have been on the call previously, you've heard some discussion around that. And then Dave Walsh will give us a brief update on the progress and the momentum that's building around the Project Unity, which is our proof of concept. And then very briefly, there's one page which I'll show you another 8 or 10 webinars that we're in the process of planning that will be coming up. We hope to get the schedule out at least 3-4 weeks in advance, and we think we'll be doing this through certainly through May, at least at that point in time. So we have a lot of stuff there, and then we'll end up with some discussion if as time permits, if we don't get to it during the call itself. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a quick intro for folks, and the way we're going to do that is if you go to your chat box, for folks who are new, you just find your chat box, and what we do is we ask people to just type their name in, and I'll call on you, and I'm going to unmute everybody in a second. So if you have background noise or your dog is howling, now would be a good time to close the door or remute yourself. Or I have the ability, I have the superpowers now to mute people as well. So, but I will unmute folks so that it's easy to speak without having to mute or double unmute yourself sometimes. And so we'll do that. It takes just a couple minutes for folks who are new to the call. We want to just say hello. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute. So who's going to be the first person? I just unmuted folks, so that's how I can go. I just remuted everybody. So what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to ask you to unmute yourself. I think a couple of people are on by phone and probably on the computer, if that's correct. I'm going to try one more time. If you are, I'm going to try to unmute, and if there's a background or feedback, I'm just going to go back on mute, and then everybody will just unmute themselves as they do their introduction. All right. There's a little bit of background noise. Why don't we get started? Just be conscious that on the phone that we'll hear you here. So with that, why don't we start with the person who said yes. So Ben Hamilton.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Hamlin. I am a senior research informaticist at the National Committee for Quality Assurance. I actually attended a Stewards of Change meeting in Baltimore several years ago that have been sort of ancillary involved, but my specialty is in informatics and quality measurement and quality improvement. And I am a performance measurement specialist, so I'm very interested in some of the activities that are being proposed for 2020 under the Stewards of Change.
Great.
Healthcare, this is Andrea.
Hey, Andrea, Jana.
Hi, Jenna.
Okay, so we've got a couple folks who are on the phone here. If you can mute yourself, if you've got another call going on here.
So,
Mute everybody.
Yeah, I think so. I got I guess Rose had called that somebody had.
Okay, we're going to go back to the old-fashioned way here. So Walt, Pastor, if you're on, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi.
Hey,
Everyone.
welcome.
This is Walt Pastor. I recently joined National Interoperability Collaborative. Can't quite get all that out this morning. I'm with EP3, so Marsley Hancock is the president of that, and then I'm also with a joining company called WebShield. And so my position here is Director of Digital Health Transformation. And our focus is on the technical side, enabling the safe and secure flow of sensitive data with provenance, meaning that the data sources link the actual regulations that bind them, solving a lot of problems and help reduce the friction in the sharing of data. So I have over 20 years of background in healthcare IT. And this is very interesting to me to hear all the various use cases.
Thanks, Walt. John.
Hi, good afternoon. John Lee, Iris Health Solutions. Just kind of joining in to get some situational awareness on interoperability initiatives. Iris is involved in a number of federal initiatives, also interested in the future of the NIEM Health domain.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Rob Waters. It's a bit of a labyrinth. Sometimes you have to unmute yourself, both from your phone and from the.
I got it. There you go. Hi, Daniel. Yeah. So I saw the email communication, and I was excited to tune in and just understand about the resources you're providing, and get a little bit of exposure to some of the projects that we're going to be representing at the 2020 State HIT Connect program. So.
That sounds great. Thanks, Rob. I think maybe in a few weeks we can schedule you to talk a little bit about that conference. It's a terrific conference.
Sure.
That'd be great. Thanks. Welcome for joining. Carol Robinson. Hey.
Hi, Daniel. This is Carol Robinson. I am founder and CEO now of two companies. Cedar Bridge Group is a consulting firm that specializes in health information technology and Medicaid policy, health transformation. And we just launched a new company. It was incorporated last week, and that is Modato Health, LLC. Modato is developing a consent management platform scalable for managing consent across large scale entities and across large geographies. And so we're really excited about that, and we'll be presenting at the pre-conference symposium, interoperability pre-conference symposium at HIMSS on March 9th on that. So I hope you come.
Thanks, Carol. Welcome back. Matthew Henry. Hey.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Got you great.
All right. Thank you. I'll turn my video on too. It's great to meet everyone. I'm just first time here. Just learned about NIC about a month and a half ago or so. I work for Child Care Aware of America. We're a national organization involved in childcare in every state, and interoperability is a personal passion of mine, as well as all of the 400 plus agencies and related state work that we do. So very, very interested in seeing a domain and other pieces of this work that's being done in health and other areas to be represented in the childcare space. So thank you for the time, and thank you for the presentation today.
Thanks so much. Welcome. Thanks so much. Carol Hussey. Carol may need to be unmuting herself. So while you're doing it.
Computer. I got it.
Great.
Good morning.
A little bit of a labyrinth.
Happy to be here. Yeah. So I work with, my company is Technical Impacts. I'm working with Daniel in a variety of capacities with the Stewards of Change and Augmented Intelligence. I've been working with state and local governments for about 20 years now, primarily in human services, very focused on interoperability across the spectrum of human services and serving our clients.
Thank you, Carol. Welcome to the call. Let's see, Scott. Gallant.
Hi, this is Scott Gallant, first time here as well. Heard wonderful things about the SOC work and really excited to be involved. I'm a fellow with the EP3 Foundation as well. Kudos to Marcelie for bringing a few new folks in. Thank you, Marcelie, for that. Working on interoperability, and I've spent most of my 20 years career working in data standards interoperability within the education space, focused on K-12, but also higher ed and the likes of workforce and professional development. So we also started another nonprofit called the Education Security and Privacy Exchange, dedicated to really working on wellness and safety through data security and privacy practices.
That's great.
Thank you.
Great. There's three from the education field today. That's great. Hopefully there's more. Madhan.
Hello, everyone. This is Madan Tirukonda. I'm a senior product manager, manager in the product strategy side here with the Signify Health. We are the leading company in the Medicare risk adjustment. This is just for my professional development. I'm interested in learning about the interoperability standards, best practices, and federal initiatives. And my friend Jeff Strand at DXC introduced me to this group. This is my first meeting, so I'm delighted to be here, and thanks, everybody.
That's great. Thanks. Hello, Heidi.
Hi. Thank you for including me in this meeting. I'm happy to be here. So my background is as a social worker, and for the last 20 years or so, I've been working at the intersection of policy and practice and data and technology, largely in homelessness, but my roots are really in general anti-poverty, and I'm really interested and passionate about busting down silos and using technology and data to do that. I recently completed the Harvard Business Analytics program, which just put wind in my sails and got me really excited about just connecting with people who are really disrupting this field and using tech to do all of that. So thank you for having me.
Welcome for joining. Brian Book.
Hey, Brian Book here. I am the president of Book Sermon Incorporated. We represent the Veterans Administration and the standards development community like HL7 and OMG and HSPC, and we have leadership positions in the community on their behalf. We actively participate in the development of healthcare standards for them, and then we bring that subject matter expertise back to the VA, and we advise them on interpretation and implementation of healthcare standards. And we've been working pretty closely with Dave Walsh. We have a care coordination platform that is called Care Nexus, and that is a fork of the Omnibus Care Plan that SAMHSA produced a few years ago. And we are providing that platform with Dave and his team to be a platform for demonstrations of different interoperability solutions around care coordination.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll hear from Project Unity just a little bit later. So welcome, Brian. Thanks. Daniel Dowdery.
Hi, I'm a research scientist for the California Department of Public Health. We're working to establish interoperability standards for all the department databases.
Great. Fantastic. Pius Ikon. We'll move to Mary Kay. Maybe we will.
Sorry, Mary Kay McDaniel. I'm with Cognosante. I do a lot in the healthcare data standards arena. I have a variety of positions at HL7. The one probably most pertinent to us for here is I'm a co-chair for financial management work group. I also hold positions at X12 and spend a lot of time at NCPDP. And I'm here, I'm very interested, well, we're all watching what NIEM is going to do with the health domain.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for joining. And so I think that's everyone. Last takers here. I want to make a quick introduction.
I'm happy to. I jumped on in a bit late. Oh, sorry. Taylor Kendal. I'm with Learning Economy, another on the education workforce side. Thanks again to Marcelly and Scott and Elliot and folks on that side who are the ultimate networkers and connectors, doing a lot of work around education and work infrastructure. Just about to launch a number of labs, both here in the US, also nationally. And yeah, really excited to, data interoperability is a huge piece of that work. So excited to be connected into this group.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I just had to cheer. Sorry. From the peanut gallery. So proud of these people and the work they're doing, each of them.
It's great to have such a good representation from the education side. Often not part of these conversations. We're glad that, and thanks Marcelly for helping wrangle everyone to this call. Not usually there. So that's great. Feel free to jump in, as I said, during the call if you want to join in the conversation here. One last pitch: if you're on the computer and you want to switch your phone number to your name, just hover over and go ahead and put your name in there so we can see who's on there, and we'll be able to call on you or know who's talking or sending notes to the through the chat. Okay, so with that. I am going to just launch into a couple of slides here, and then we're going to move through that, and then move through the presentations quickly. So some of the stuff folks who've been here before have probably seen, but I want to just give a little bit of an overview of the NIC. So we refer to the NIC as the community of networks. The idea is that there are clearly there's a ton of work going on across the country in every single domain, sector, and agency. But what we have been observing over many years is that there tends to be less communication across those different, what we refer to as domains. I think of sectors as sort of public, private, nonprofit. Domains are, the way we've defined them, at least the chunk that we've focused on, is human services, public health, education, public safety, emergency medical response, and healthcare IT. And there is a lot sort of organized and consolidated underneath those. So don't feel like you're left out if you don't happen to see your own particular program in there. We're trying to get our arms around that. And the idea is to see how to connect, and within each of those, I would say is a network by itself. So within human services, within public health, there was a ton of things going on. There are lots of collaboration happening within those fields, but we feel like there's less happening between those domains. And so the purpose of what we're doing is to try to facilitate those cross-domain. There's a lot of reinvention that's happening and probably a whole lot of potential for reuse. A couple years ago, we wrote the 6 domains of primary focus for collaboration and interoperability, sponsored by HIMSS, and that is a document that kind of lays out each of the 6 domains and some of the major drivers of change and technology and policy and funding. And I point you in that direction if you're interested in it. It's kind of the foundation upon what we're trying to do here and how we're trying to represent the universe of health and human services. And as I said, these are the 6 domains. Cool little graphic. And what we're attempting to do is to connect those dots so that we have a better ability to do that. And so over to the fall and the early winter, the sessions that we put together were in many ways focused on each of those domains. So as you go back and look at the hub, and you'll see things on there. So for instance, on sort of roughly organized under human services, we had a session on Family First, which is the new legislation for foster care, some work on the opioid crisis. I put Chris Gibbons and Smart Cities in here, and also some work with Pew Charitable on our administrative data and how do generally HHS organizations connect themselves. In some of the other sessions, we spent a considerable amount of time on healthcare IT. So we featured Da Vinci Project, Gravity, TEFCA on here, and then Dave Ross from the Task Force for Global Health talked a little bit about healthcare IT in the developing world. And so we've been focusing on those domains in the health field. Education, we had the one sort of formal presentation really on the key drivers. Elliot provided that to us, and Paul Wormley on public safety and the critical role of public safety. We haven't actually had a specific one on public health or on emergency medical. And the reason I'm showing this to you in this way is to say that what we have been trying to do, the perhaps magic behind the madness behind the magic, or one of those two things, is to try to expose people to the various domains so that over time, people who are less familiar with a particular domain, education, for example, or public safety, have the opportunity to hear from experts and subject matter leaders around what is really driving those. And what we plan to do going forward into 2020 is to continue to expand out those conversations. So we add on and layer onto the education domain, the public safety domain, and some of the other domains that we haven't yet really covered too well. So the idea is ultimately to have subject matter experts and have material on each of those domains so that we can continue to and advance the conversations between those domains. I think, and what we've experienced is that the cross-domain conversations are the really exciting place for us to be. And when we can learn from each other and bring learning, and as you heard already from some of the introductions, there's a lot of work going on between domains. People are really trying to do this work. We're trying to be we're serving as at least one of the platforms to be able to encourage that work, both through these webinars and the consistency and the frequency of these webinars to really drive that, but also ideally online and on the hub itself. And so that's the background there. Let me just pause for a second, and then I want to just do a little bit of an update on a couple of things that we did, a couple other things we did last year. But are there any particular comments or reflections that people have right now? Okay, so feel free to jump in. Just a couple of things. One of the two of the things that we've done this year, are pretty proud of, is publishing the opioid use disorder prevention playbook. And part of the driver for that was the need for cross-domain communication. Obviously, anybody and everybody who's involved with this particular area of addressing the issues, it became very obvious that addressing the opioid crisis really requires cross-domain work. And if you look at the use cases around that, you'll see that not only public safety and criminal justice, but healthcare and public health and education all have a role to play. And so the playbook is intentionally called the playbook because of its functional nature of it. We encourage you to look at that. And in fact, the proof of concept that we're developing is again based on an opioid use case. Unfortunately, it is still very prominent and very prevalent in virtually every community. We also published work with our partner Academy Health on social determinants. It's kind of a primer on social determinants and some of the work that's going on in and across the country, mostly foundation funded. I'm proud to also share with you the interoperability mural showcases, and that's we've done 3 of them this year, where we brought our giant murals. You may have seen if you go to our website or some of the materials, we do a lot of graphic illustration, big 8-foot murals, and we had the opportunity to present those in a gallery-like setting, both in San Diego and then at the MESC conference, and then most recently at the Connected Health Conference in Boston, which was a HIMSS event within a digital health platform. It's a great way to share knowledge we've been accumulating over the last 10 years, and to again, support the cross-domain kind of learning and sharing. All that stuff is on the website, and all the murals are up there. There are scores and scores of murals to be looking at there. Just a few more details here, and then we'll move on to the presentation. So we're really excited and proud about the growth in the hub this year. I really have to call out the team with Sandes and Michael Kerr and Adam and Nava, who are on this call here, really helping put this thing together. For those of you who lived and worked in the collaboration space, you all know it's not an easy thing to do. We're approaching 1,000 members. There's over 400 organizations represented. We've posted lots of resources, a lot of visitors, and I'm proud to say that we've had over 100,000 page views. So people are coming to it, they're visiting, and we are learning along the way. We're learning and adapting. By no means is it done, it's finished. And as you'll see both today as we go forward and over in the future, we're constantly making changes and learning how to adapt the platform and configure it to really meet the needs of both the individuals and the groups that we've set up. And there's a number of groups on there. Just a very quick stats in terms of the people on here, their level of interest. Most interest is from those who responded. Signed out. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Sundays, can you make sure that I'm still on this call here? Just respond to me.
Yes, you're still here.
Okay, it's got a weird message here on my screen. So
no, all is good at my end.
Okay. So a lot of interest in public health, human services, health IT, folks from the education, public safety, and emergency response are fewer people, but a growing level of interest in and amongst those domains. So get in and vote regularly and vote frequently, and hopefully over time we'll have representation from all of these fields as we go forward. So also we just wanted to finish up that we were the awardee of a silver level, three silver awards from the Davy Awards for the hub itself, which is great recognition that that it is a collaboration portal that's being recognized as being responsive from a recognized organization that really looks at a lot of this. And so I encourage you to participate in that. So what we're going to do now, I think this is true. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly go through 2 more slides, and I'm going to ask Karen to talk a little bit about social determinants. So we have 3 previews today. One is social determinants, and we're planning a series with that, and Karen will be leading that. And then a preview of the NIEM model, and then Dave will follow up with the Project Unified proof of concept. Very briefly, I won't go through these. This presentation will be up there. You can see if you're on the screen. We've got at least a number of other presentations coming in a couple of weeks on data visualization, some more work from ONC FAST, some new work we're doing with Pew Charitable Trust on the civil legal world. Karen Alliance, AHRQ is interested in meeting and talking and sharing the work that they're doing at the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Just recently talked with Matt Gee at Bright Hive, and they're doing some fascinating work around data trust across the country. And we also are working to focus on race equity, bias, and health disparities, and then also to come back and do some more work on the Family Prevention Act, which is a very significant new legislation and regulations around foster care, and which really requires a lot of interoperability. We've got some groups. The current groups, we have an opioid group, social determinants, confidentiality, and the Project Unify. And we will be starting 2 new groups shortly. One is the NIEM group and one also on civil legal, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. So the idea is to be creating these groups, to be engaging with people who care particularly about this work, and providing a home for organizations or domains or groups that really want to dive into this work going forward. So with that, I hope I was able to give you guys a little bit of a sense of where we're headed. A lot of activity and being planned, and I'm really delighted about the work that Karen is going to be helping us lead on social determinants. As we all know, that is a rapidly growing, expanding area. So with that, Karen, if you're on, let me turn the microphone over to you.
Okay.
And,
can you hear me?
Yes, you're
Great.
Loud and clear.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So we've been having conversations for quite a long time about obviously social determinants of health and well-being. And in fact, that has got to be one of the hottest topic of conversation in the fields of public health, which is my primary field, although I'm also a physician. But also now more and more in healthcare reform, and the language and understandings beginning to creep into all the other domains that people recognize and that the hub is using to sort of kind of give a framework for conversations. In fact, it's probably one of the most pertinent conversations to connecting those domains, because quite frankly, the things around us that impact our health, particularly as we're developing as human beings, are between all those domains. They're not the exclusive property or responsibility of any one domain. And that has made it both incredibly powerful and very challenging. And so we wanted, and one of the, you can see the interest if you just look at how many people have signed up as being very interested in the social determinants of health group in Stewards of Change. And so for me, the question has been, how do we take this from just a million conversations going on, often just kind of reiterating the same thing over and over again, and start answering the question of how do we operationalize social determinants of health, whether it's for your individual work or as a society or as a domain such as public health where I work. What can we actually do about it? And so that's the conversation that we want to have at NIC. And obviously a huge piece of that is about the technology and new organizational structures and models, et cetera. And so we thought it was really an appropriate conversation for the NIC. There are almost as many different approaches, purposes, and framing in the conversations for SDOH as there are people interested in it. And so to some extent, the conversation about SDOH, Daniel mentioned this, I think, at the last conversation we had, kind of echoes what happened around the conversation of interoperability. When it started, nobody actually knew what the word meant or had a kind of generic gist of what it meant. But then it took a lot of work to actually get to a place where people are working on actually making practical steps forward to leverage the interoperability to do the things that we want to do. So we need to have this conversation, we think, within NIC, but in keeping with other conversations on the hub, we really do want to be less esoteric, less theoretical, and more practical. And particularly, this is really, we're looking at health and human services arenas, the 6 domains. The question is, what can or should we do as individuals, organizations, or the collaborative to actually approach SDOH in a way that is going to make a difference? In other words, we want to move from talk to action. Easier said than done, we know that. We also know that we can't boil the ocean, and we don't want to spend everyone's time just on those early exploratory conversations. But we do need to level set what we're going to talk about, because like the field of public health, we always say, you know, everything is public health, but you can't actually have you can have a fun cocktail conversation about that, but it's a little hard to make it practical. So what we're proposing is we're going to have a webinar series that starts with at most 1 to 3 initial conversations that are designed to set the parameters for the longer conversation that we'll have. The rest of the series is designed then to lead to some sort of concrete product. What the parameters of that conversation are and what that product is going to be is actually going to be decided by the group. We're not coming into this saying this conversation is going to do this thing. And rather, this is intended to be an interactive development group. And some examples of the parameters are, there are many ways to look at social determinants of health. We could decide, let's pick 1 or 2 of the determinants that we think within the field of health and human services are most amenable to action having good outcomes or improvements over a particular duration of time. Alternatively, we could say, let's look across the domains at efforts that are ongoing now and models that are ongoing now to try to incorporate and affect social determinants as part of an outcome. For example, in healthcare reform, the accountable communities for health models that have an explicit focus, not just on health outcomes, but on affecting the social determinants of health in order to create those health outcomes. Or we could say, what is it that who are the people, or not just people, I should say, who has a role in really as a society affecting health? There's everything from politicians who set statewide policy to other, those of us actually acting in our fields, that in the health and human services world, there's the role of community. But we really want to have a focus on deciding as a group where we want to go with this conversation in this year, and what kind of product we're going to move toward, whether that's a white paper, whether that is a playbook along the lines of what we did with the opioid work, or whether it's a convening of some sort on the practical applications of a focus on the social determinants of health. So Daniel, that's what I was going to say to sort of, it's hard to describe a process that will be developed as the process is ongoing, but that's my best shot at that.
Thanks, Karen. I think you did a great job of that. I think before I say anything more, let me just open it up. I'm inviting reflections or commentary from folks who are on the call with us here. I know there's a lot of interest and passion around SDOH, so I'm going to shut up for a second and see if anyone wants to pop in with a thought. Well, I think we.
Okay, Daniel, sorry, it took me that long to find my phone again, to find the
There
button.
you go. Hey,
so I'm so grateful to hear the process and the participation that we can have supporting stewards of change, becoming a trust authority, and perhaps in the future providing the trust credentials for human and health and education services. And when you look at some of the presentations, either by WebShield or by the Sovereign Foundation, where they're looking at new solutions around data models, they all require trust authorities. And I just feel so confident that the stewards of change will be able to help set and establish trusted criteria around these products and projects and processes that will enable trust and be able to lift us out from dialogue and wish from 2019 and into prototypes that can be demonstrated and tested. So anyway, I'm giving you kudos to Stewards of Change and Daniel and Adam and everybody who's been patiently working at this for over 15 years.
Thank you, Marcely. I appreciate that. I think a big part of what you're saying and what we've talked about in the past is establishing that trust. And not only within, within an organization, within a program, or even within an agency, which all of you who are involved operationally know how difficult that is, but then across the domains. And I think social determinants is really one of those places where that sense of trust, developing that sense of trust is going to be so critical in terms of the sharing of information, the usage of that information. How do we work together in sort of unnatural ways? I mean, there's, collaboration is not a natural behavior, at least in this space, as much as we'd like to see it become. And with the greater interest, especially from the healthcare and the health IT community, which is now looking at this in a bigger way, how do we establish those kind of trust parameters? And I think that's a really important point. That is part of I think what we'll bake into the proof of concept that Dave will talk about in a little bit. Is how do you establish that, and how do you know who it is that you're talking to is the person you're really supposed to be talking to or providing information to. So I know Karen from within California in your former role as a director and the accountable care communities, accountable health communities. I'm sure that was a huge part of it is bringing people to the table to understand they have a part of the solution. And how do we do that more broadly when we're not even inside a single agency?
Yeah, and it was just for me the sheer frustration of feeling like, particularly as a public health professional, that really understanding the importance of addressing social determinants of health and not having the faintest idea how to actually go about that. It's been very heartening to see the concept of addressing the things that impact people as they're growing, and even once you're already ill, trying to save money by fixing things that aren't strictly medical. But it's really still a question of what works, or how do we do this, or what's my part. And if one of my hopes is that we will be able to have a conversation so that pretty much everybody involved with it who has been really concerned about what's my role, actually has some sense at least of what their part in this whole developing area actually could be.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. The way you just define that is great. So what do I bring to the table? How do I play in this? And I'm seeing that more and more. For instance, the HIMSS community is now really focusing on this from the healthcare IT perspective, and how does healthcare IT sort of address this? And they're ramping up their efforts. We're hoping that come up February when we're there, we'll be able to sort of contribute to that conversation, and again bring the other perspectives. I know our partners from the education community have a very similar sort of equation. People talk, of course, about much of the healthcare outcomes, right, come from outside of healthcare, clinical healthcare, right? I think folks, I think Marshall, you or maybe from, I can't remember exactly where, talked about a similar sort of equation within education, where most of the learning education actually comes outside of the classroom. And it's interesting to look at sort of parallel universes and seeing how we can contribute and collaborate in a way that really addresses what else is happening outside of that particular domain. It's that intersection you talked about.
And Daniel, this is Elliot. If I could add there, because I kicked off a national conversation yesterday, a webinar on physical health and well-being as an aspect of school safety, and brought in the tech component of what is technology doing to actually, simple things like vaccinations, flu, and one of the things that came up as one of the biggest issues was this inability for us to have good conduits of communication with our community, because so much of the information is lying there, and that all ties right back into data interoperability. So Karen, I'm so glad you're kicking this off. So K-12 is extremely interested in it, because if our kids are sick, our teachers are sick, then we have a big impact on everything else that goes on in the community with the parents and stuff like that, and vice versa. So this is exciting.
Yeah, and educational attainment is actually one of the strongest determinants of long-term health outcomes. And so we're like, we should be in lockstep, and yet at Fields we find ourselves moving in parallel rather than together.
Silos are awesome things. They're really good.
This is Scott Gallant. If I may add to that, the education sector, kudos for them to finally getting involved in numerous initiatives that span international and global standards around data outside of the education space. For the first time, we're seeing not just interoperability between K-12 and higher ed, but we're seeing the lines blurred between credentials, competencies, and skills that come from elsewhere in life. So certainly workforce and professional development, but sectorally speaking, we're focused steadily on looking and zoning in on specific niches. Potentially, the DoD has a lot of work that's happening. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the work that they're doing around trying to look at economic growth patterns, the Department of Ed and their focus on mobility, both of those initiatives are starting to lend towards distributed ledger kind of initiatives, and there's a lot happening, and everybody's finally in this zone where, okay, I think we've got the data standards set in the education space. Let's see what we can do to lend outside, and the likes of other sectors are starting to look inbound. So it's an interesting and a wonderful time to be involved in this.
Let's have a few more minutes on this and we can move along. I know Heidi, I think you have raised your hand.
Yeah, I just have a question, and again, I'm new to this group, but I worked in California, and I've worked in New Jersey, and I work in Massachusetts, and I've worked around, and in Massachusetts, none of the programs have the same footprint. So I know in California, most programs sort of, and in New Jersey, a lot of programs go through the county, and then the county has a lot of sort of authority and oversight, or could potentially be that conduit to distribute funds and get reporting and data back and do that analysis. Here in Massachusetts, every state and federal program has a different footprint. And I'm wondering, geographic footprint. So if you're getting services for WIC in, one region, your services for education are going to be totally different. And I'm wondering, that seems to me like an inherently enormous challenge, but I'm wondering how, if that's come into the thinking about things, or how states are dealing with that.
Yeah, so this is Karen. Yeah, no, absolutely. That, and particularly if you're working within government or within, a school district, it is one of the bigger challenges. I think the ways around that become a little bit more clear when you recognize that we're not the only players. The entities that have these footprints, nor should we necessarily be the most prominent players. And so that's part of the conversation we want to have, which is, nobody owns this whole concept of creating what we in public health call healthy and resilient communities, which are obviously made up of healthy and resilient people. And so it takes new models, and many of us need entirely new skill sets. Things like, what does it actually mean to have authentic community engagement and leadership in a process? Because ultimately, as you said, so much of, as someone in education, so much of the information that we need, and in order for things to be successful, requires the community to be involved in a real way, not as a passive recipient or just somebody you send a survey out to periodically. And so it's those new areas, those sort of cutting edge kind of ways of coming together that I think hold some of the best practice. And that could be among the things that we begin to try to look at. What is the role of sort of governmental and quasi-governmental organizations, as opposed to, the nonprofit sector, as opposed to some other way of approaching these things?
So thanks for that. This should be a really exciting conversation. I think one of the things we'll do is on the group, the Social Determinants group, we'll post some thinking around that. We've been writing a little bit on kind of where we think this is headed, and we'll communicate that via the hub and through the newsletter that hopefully everybody is receiving. And we'll be coming back to that. So if you're of interest, if this is of interest to you, of course, we'll be reaching out to you, and you can certainly reach out to us to make sure that we're in the conversation and the thinking and the planning. And we're excited, Karen, for your participation in this. There's a lot of other really interesting things, not only from education, but as I mentioned earlier, from the civil legal world and others that I think we'll bring into this. So stay tuned. And we'll move along now to one way to actually help connect the dots here is, of course, through standards. And Kate Ryan from Iris Health Solutions been very actively engaged and involved with the NIEM Community of Interest, has offered to do a little preview for next week's webinar. And Kate, say hello. I can advance your few slides that you have, and why don't you just give us an overview of what we can expect to see next week.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everyone. So yes, Kate Ryan. I'm not new to the group. I've been on here for about a year now, on and off. And so I'm with Iris Health Solutions. I'm a health IT consultant. And most recently, over the last 2 years, I was the program manager for the NIEM Health Community of Interest. And Daniel, you said you did have my slides?
Yep, I'm gonna.
Okay, if you want to advance to the next.
Here we go.
Awesome, thank you. So NIEM has about 14, now 15 domains. The Census Bureau has created a new statistics domain. And the reason I say NIEM Health Community of Interest is because pretty early on when I was working with the Federal Health Architecture, who led the NIEM Community of Interest, Health Community of Interest, pretty early on we decided right now we didn't think it would be appropriate to create a domain. We were kind of still in the learning process ourselves about what NIEM was all about. And quite frankly, we were a little bit scared. Oh no, not another standard, because there's certainly not a lack of standards in health IT. So what we did was we created a community of interest and just provided a forum for folks interested in health information exchange to learn about the various messaging and terminology standards. So LINC, SNOMED, and HL7 FHIR, talk to them about that and help them with some of their information exchange package documents, which is the way information is exchanged through NIEM, now called a messaging specification, which is really a package that describes the construction and the content of a NIEM information exchange. So we were talking through points with the community. At one point, I think we had 60 or so folks joining those calls. We created educational documents and tutorials, but through our conversations, through questions that we were asked, we realized that maybe we were thinking about this, I don't want to say wrong, but let's think about this differently. What is the uniqueness of NIEM is that it does touch on all these various domains. So maybe NIEM Health, though it certainly won't center on and focus on a traditional, provider to provider setting, or what we traditionally think of health information exchanges, we started thinking about these, what we're coining edge case scenarios. And I get that from my colleague, Brian Hanspicker, who may or may not be on today's call. So if you want to go to the next. Oh, hello, Brian. How are you? If you want to advance to the next slide. So here's just an idea of some of the NIEM Health edge case scenarios that we've talked about. And for some of you who have already heard Brian and I, this won't be anything new. But here's some of these cross-domain exchanges that we think are necessary and are important to act on. So during this work and kind of our aha moments and talking about this, FHA, the Federal Health Architecture, was beginning its sunsetting phase. So we had on our to-do list to go around to different federal agencies and different organizations and ask around and see who would be willing and would be able to sort of pick up where we left off and build from it. So whether it's carrying on a NIEM Health Community of Interest or developing a domain, giving them sort of a starting point. And we had a number of discussions with various different agencies, and really who's latched on has been Health and Human Services, specifically Robert Gallant, who is a senior advisor to HHS's Office of the Chief Information Officer. If you want to go to the next slide. And he's who will be speaking with everyone next week. So you're stuck with me today. I apologize. He wasn't able to make it today. But he will be addressing the group in much more detail next week. We'll be going over the status of NIEM Health, so past, present, and future. Talk about HHS interest in standing up a health domain, and they would be leading that work as stewards. They've said that their focus would be in social determinants of health, as well as looking in and exchanges for the opioid epidemic. Well, also, NIC has come forward and said, these things can take a while to iron out the details, as they so often do with government. So we don't want to miss out on some of the good work that can happen and these discussions. So they have offered to start using the NIC and the Collaboration Hub to stand up a group that at the moment is called NIEM Health's Potential. We're standing up that group and it will be live on Monday. to start facilitating these various discussions, go through some of those use cases that were outlined in this previous slide, identify maybe different edge case scenarios that we hadn't thought of, and sort of tease out the details there, and who the key players or key exchange partners would be, and then provide chances for everyone to ask questions about what to expect for the NIEM Health domain. We'll also quickly walk through that group that I spoke about that's on the NIC Collaboration Hub. So that's what's coming up next week. Are there any questions for me at the moment?
Hi, Caitlin. This is Mary Kay McDaniel, and speaking from the work I'm doing at 2 of the other standard organizations, one of the things that would be really helpful for us is to understand where that intersection with NIEM and our other standards takes place. As we have people come to the table and there's concern about whether, well, you know, we need to do this through NIEM or we don't need to do it through NIEM. Well, we can't do it through NIEM because there's no health domain. We are building out transactions now that for various agencies, and there's no, as you know, with all of them, it can be a little fuzzy. So if we could actually kind of clarify that as we work through some of these and look at the actual use cases, and I made an assumption as I was thinking through this, and that is that you'd be looking at the existing standards where they are today already and looking at incorporating them, and only building out something new in NIEM if the need isn't met. Is that kind of the thought process behind that, or is that all to be determined?
So I can't speak for Rob, but that's what we started to do back in the community of interest with FHA. So what we started to do was we realized there were over 300 quote unquote health elements inside of NIEM that various domains tried to sort of work out themselves. So we've gone ahead and provided a mapping for those various elements and map them to existing health standards. So that is there now. If you go to the Health Community of Interest page, and I can send that link to everyone in the chat in a little bit, that's already there. And I believe that Rob would like to continue doing that so that we're not just creating new standards, so that we are drawing from existing standards. And yes, like you're saying, if there comes a point where it's something that's new and hasn't been done before, we work through that together through the Community of Interest Forum.
Okay, this is Brian. Minor correction, I think, is that what we have now is an inventory of what the 300 plus healthcare related elements are that have previously been defined across a half a dozen different NIEM domains. But we've only mapped a handful of demographic elements to date to FHIR and HL7. And that's the work that is yet to be done, is to continue to define mappings across both the existing healthcare elements that are already in NIEM, as well as any additional healthcare elements that need to be defined in NIEM, and ensure that they're defined in a way that is consistent with, compatible with the healthcare standard definitions from FHIR and HL7. It's not our intent to replace or even replicate the existing healthcare standards, but rather to ensure that when, for instance, a human services agency needs to make use of some healthcare related information, that they can reasonably map it from, for instance, a FHIR message into a NIEM IEPD. Over.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Great. Any other thoughts before we move on? Well, I'm excited about being able to host the conversation. I know it's come up multiple times over the months since we started Let's Get Technical. And I think there's some confusion that we can clarify with the help of Kate and Brian and Rob and others and Paul, who are expert in this, and figure out ways that we can exchange that data so that it will support, some of the work we were talking about just earlier that Karen was talking about on social determinants. How are we going to be exchanging information, particularly between public safety, health, education, and I'm really excited about that, because in many ways that feels like the foundation that we need to be building, or looking at how we can adopt and adapt from other places. The whole purpose of this. So we're excited about that. I suspect that we'll have multiple other conversations. So next week will just kind of be a launch of it, and as the domain works its way through the federal labyrinth, we'll be sort of pursuing and pushing and encouraging that conversation along the way. And it should work its way into our proof of concept and social determinants work, and others who are privy and interested to this kind of domain work. So we're delighted about that, and it'll be a good example. I think, did we put up the domain is, I think there's a post to it up there. Right now it's just an example also of the flexibility of the hub in terms of being able to stand up groups that are focused on things. They don't need to be permanent. Hopefully this will be for a while. But that's really part of the infrastructure that we, and I'm derelict in not mentioning our sponsor, our foundation's support from the Kresge Foundation, has made a significant investment in helping us build out this community resource, so that others like NIEM and as we move forward, other areas can easily, rapidly, and efficiently build out a group, again, for a purpose, short-term, long-term, medium-term purpose. So you almost think about it as the house is being built, and been saying, rooms are for rent, so to speak, and we're looking to help stand up those individual different groups on there. So we're excited about that, and I see 2020 as being a real transitional year for really bringing other groups on. And then again, as I said, facilitating the conversation between those groups in ways that we'll be experimenting with, both on Zoom and other ways that we'll be able to do that. All right, but before we turn our attention to the POC, any last comments on this? Okay, that was the throat clearing. Great, thank you. That's an affirmation to move forward, I think. I'll take it that way. So Dave Walsh, you there? Oh, this is there's an announcement. You should have gotten our newsletter, and I'm sure we'll be torturing your email box over the next couple of days, next week, and hopefully we will just this time send you one invite, one Zoom link, and I promise not to screw it up this week, or this year, hopefully. So with that, let me get to Dave. And it's been a real pleasure. Been doing a lot of work over the holiday season, and Dave has been just fantastic, reaching out to a lot of their POC members. We're going to spend a few minutes, or Dave's going to spend a few minutes talking about kind of where we're at, what we're looking forward to, and then encouraging people to participate. And Dave, let me warn you, I changed the order of your slide a little bit. So the first slide up here, as you'll see, is actually kind of a very brief recap of what the world looks like today from the POC. Feel free to embellish that, and then we can talk a little bit more about where things are at.
Sure. Yeah, so let me give just a tad of background myself. I know a number of people that are on the call, but my background, my history has been much more in the healthcare / Medicaid space. And in that space, for quite a few years now, I have chaired a group called the MITAC, or Technical Architecture Committee. And our goal was really to educate people on how emerging technologies could help the Medicaid domain, the healthcare domain, and so forth. In recent years, we've been working with a number of people. Mary Kay McDaniel, who's on this call, has always been a great resource for us, understanding what standards were, what interoperability meant, what HL7 meant, and so forth. Over the last 2 years, another person that's on the call here, Brian Book, Brian is with Book Zerman, and we had based our proof of concept demonstration, which was always kind of our MO, you know, what we did at the Medicaid conferences, to be able to demonstrate, to do a proof of concept demonstration to help educate people on what was going on, how these technologies could be used and so forth. And over the last couple of years, Brian has been very instrumental in helping us with a capability that he's got. It came out of SAMHSA, as he said earlier, for care management, for case management capabilities. And the real reason that we got excited about it is it would allow us to communicate an approach to a really burning issue, opioid management solutions, care management solutions, and would allow us to do that through an emerging technology called FHIR, Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. So what we did was we integrated Brian's rendition of the OCP or the SAMHSA technology. Brian is continuing to add to that, but it allowed us to use FHIR to communicate with it. So we got to learn something about FHIR as we went. We expect to be doing that again this year. But we're going to be taking that model and moving it forward into both healthcare and human services. So it's about education and proof of concepts, what can be done, what can't be done, how to bring the best ideas forward. So that's really our goal, is to educate people on these standards that will facilitate the interoperability and foster those discussions of how that will work. So Daniel, if you could go to the next slide, I'd appreciate it.
Actually, David, it would be great. I'd love it if you just gave maybe you're going to do this on this slide, is the progress we've made over the last month and your outreach to the various different players, and the fact that the group is actually operating. There's been a number of working groups meetings, and that is on the way for people who are new to the concept or new to the group. This is our first collaboration with Might Attack, but there's actually work that is happening on the both, you know, over the phone and
right
on the web.
Yeah. So if you look at this slide, I think this slide and the next slide are going to help, and one after that is going to help us say what are the next steps. So if you look at this, what we're really trying to do with Project Unify is, with a proof of concept implementation, build from the bottom up. So there's definitely going to be some requirements to be able to exchange data, implement security, and so forth. So what we're doing is building from the bottom up. And where we are at today, if you look at the upper right-hand corner where it says MyHIN IOL, that is the Michigan Health Information Network, who has an environment called Interoperability Land that provides a repository where you can read and write information into it using the FHIR standards to be able to go do that. And that's a great help to have the FHIR servers and the profiles of people in there and the healthcare information and so forth. So on the back end side, we're collaborating with the Michigan Health Information Network, MIHIN. And then if you look across the bottom here, you'll see a number of users of that kind of information. It could be a citizen, a caseworker, probation officer, but they all are going to need some level of application to be able to, in a fire compliant manner, using the standards, to be able to exchange data. So across the bottom where you see the blue text, and all the blue text is what we currently have working operational, those user communities can access that fire data. And one of the goals, if you look at the second from the bottom line, is that we want to make the exchange of that data available across the broadest swath of technologies. And what we have done so far is implemented it so that it will run on Apple devices, iOS devices, or Android devices. So virtually any kind of phone or tablet, you can access that information. And typically what we're doing right now is providing the capability to create, read, update, delete that information. So there's an application, and recently we've got that working in a web browser as well. So an application that can access fire-based resources on MIHIN through phones, tablets, browsers, using a create, read, update. So it's the lowest level of being able to interoperate. Daniel, can you go to the next slide, please?
Yep.
So the one addition that we've got here is we're working with Eric John and a platform that he has called HS Link, which will allow us to do the same things, but in human services related domains. So the goal here is that we can, in a very short time frame, exchange information with fire using the fire standards, or be able to access human services information via similar APIs, but they are REST and going to be working in conjunction with Eric and HS Link on the different programs that we'll be able to communicate with. So if you'll go to the next slide, Daniel. This is where we are currently at with the proof of concept. And again, we're building from the bottom up, but it shows the capability to perform CRUD operations, create, read, update, and delete operations on fire-based records that are in the MIHIN domain. The left-hand screen really is about you creating a record or a resource in a fire domain where you enter some specific data there and you click on submit. And then the right hand is showing the ability to delete. So you would click on the trash can or edit, where you would be able to modify any of the data. And again, this is all data that is currently on the Michigan Health Information Network interoperability platform that they've got. Or as you see the records enumerated, they are all read from the MIHIN repository. And it's important, I think I neglected to mention this, but the approach that we're taking is to build this in a freely available open source approach to it, so that people can look at how these things are accomplished to educate them, or they can use the code freely to say, I like some of the aspects of what you've done, but I want to bring my own secret sauce to the approach. So the goal will be to remain open source, and we have recently gotten an individual, Andrew Lang. Andrew was with the state of Vermont, involved in this process, and he's going to be the individual that is, if you will, the gatekeeper for the open source repositories. And Andrew is working out how exactly to do that, but I would expect this code to be available for review, reuse, modification, whatever you want to do with it, within the next couple of weeks. And Andrew will be the gatekeeper that allows people access to it. So if you could go,
Dave,
thank you.
let me just jump in here because we're running up against the end of the time here. So I put those slides up. That's what I said before. I moved the slides around before. What I wanted to just say is I've been impressed and excited about the participation from the various different partners on this. We plan to hold separate, even more detailed conversations that Dave will be running with Eric and Andrew and Brian and the rest of the crowd. So just to kind of sort of expedite this so we can end on time here. That group, which I mentioned earlier, is on the hub. It's just being refurbished right now. So next week you'll see sort of a new group or a refurbished group for the POC that will have a lot of the information, background, timeline, those kinds of things. And I know, Dave, you wanted to encourage people to come on, and if they want to participate, that's welcome. And if they want to observe and provide commentary and recommendations and ideas, that's also incredibly welcome as well. So I don't know if you had any last things before I just
yeah, the last thing that I would mention, it was on the other slide, I just didn't see it, is would love to have people meet us in the middle. As I was saying, we're starting at the bottom level. How do we technically follow the standards and be able to exchange the data? We would love to have people meet us on the hub with issues that need to be resolved. One of the things that we did with Brian Book is we took the technology and applied it to a very meaningful use case, the opioid epidemic. Would love to see people start to engage with us on what their problems are that they would like to solve, if they feel we can be of some assistance being able to do that. So again, that conversation will occur on the hub as we start to move forward, but love to have people get engaged, whether you're a coder, a tester, or somebody who has a business problem. Love to get you engaged in it. So if there's any questions, please feel free to ask.
Question for you. Will you be posting Andrew's contact information for us just so that we can reach out?
I certainly will. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Thank you. This is very interesting.
So one note is that on the hub, once you join the hub, there's a member directory there. And so Andrew Lang, L-A-I-N-G, is there. You can reach people through there. What we're trying to do is create, through the hub also communication, so that it's kind of focused in. You can also join as a member of the POC. But everybody who's on there is everybody who's on the hub has contact information there. So anyone is available to be reached there as part of the part of joining the hub is that availability for communication. Dave, I'm also, I'm excited about also connecting in with, the work that Kate just described on NIEM, being able to integrate that into this. Also the work and the work we'll be doing with Karen on SDOH. There's a important role here for that. And as well, some of the other upcoming seminars that I mentioned will also be talking about and looking at standards, and that will be something that should be interesting and again interconnected. So if there's not any other questions, I'm going to say just a tiny bit more, then we'll close up here. Last questions, comments? Okay. So there's a couple things that are coming. I'm not going to go into them. We can talk about those at future events here. But and one of the things, actually, I will mention one thing in particular. We are going to be starting up. We've already started up some work on a new confidentiality and privacy playbook in partnership with the Network for Public Health Law and Data Across Sectors for Health, which is funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So that work on confidentiality and privacy, I know anybody who's in this interoperability work has huge interest in that. And so we'll be looking, we'll be actually inviting people to participate in that. We'll be looking for jurisdictions who have made some progress in that area, who may want to be considered for being included in that playbook as a example. And a number of other things in terms of also continuing to look for curators for some of the groups here. Like Dave is curating the POC and some of the Let's Get Technical. We are looking for people who are interested in supporting the hub, either in any of the domains, and you'll be seeing some more communication around our request for that support as well. And finally, for those of you who are new to the call today, if you're not, please join the membership. And we're also, we're sending out material all the time, particularly at the beginning of the week for the following week. So if you are, for whatever reason, not receiving that, go ahead and send an email, get on the hub, make sure that you're receiving that kind of information. And of course, we're also beginning to look for sponsors for our newsletter. We're looking for sustainability around some of this work as well. So if you want to reach an audience and deliver a message, we're delighted to help you do that. And with that, we're at 1:30. Thanks for your attention, participation, comments, and thoughts on the hub. Welcome, and we'll see you next week with Rob and Kate and Brian on the NIEM webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you then next week.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, everyone.